So I will now introduce our speaker tonight. This is Irv Slifkin. He has had a lifelong love of movies and popular culture. He is a native Philadelphian, so he's good folk, I would say. Irv teaches film and journalism classes at Temple University, and he is the co-author of books called Filmadelphia, A Celebration of a City's Movies, and Groovy Movies, Far Out Films in the Psychedelic Era. In addition to that, he has written for such publications as the Philadelphia Inquirer, Entertainment Weekly, Hollywood Reporter, Chicago Tribune, and the Los Angeles Times. Tonight, he's going to talk to us about the Jersey Shore at the movies, and as we promised in the blurb, he's sparing us the traffic jams and the toll booths. I'm very much looking forward to hearing about some films which I probably haven't had a chance to see yet, so he's going to pique my curiosity, and without further ado, here's Mr. Irv Slifkin. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for coming, everybody. Unfortunately, it's so hot in my apartment. How hot is it? Well, I'm sweating, let's put it that way, and I'm waiting for the Fudgy Wudgy guy to come through and sell some Fudgy Wudgy bars, but I don't think that's going to happen. But why don't we get in the time machine and go back 102 years, maybe? Yeah, I think it's about 102, 103 years. And take a look at this. That is the Atlantic City Boardwalk in Atlantic City. It's 1919 in those shots, and that's when it was truly the entertainment capital of the country, at least, and maybe even the world. That was that footage was shot for the Ford Motor Company, because there was a big trade show coming into the convention center in Atlantic City. It was sort of a promotional thing that they did to get people to go to Atlantic City and to play up the excitement. Atlantic City and other shore points have been in a lot of movies over the years, and they actually made their way into silent films before this, filmed by Thomas Edison, who not only was this genius inventor, of all these different things, but also was a filmmaker and had a production studio in North Jersey. And he took his cameras over to Atlantic City to shoot stuff that was similar to that. The sound in this was edited in. Of course, this was only a silent film. They added the sound in to get the authenticity. And it was something that Fox put out. So it was done to promote the Atlantic City shore and what was going on there and all the activities, but also was actually shown in theaters as a tourism thing to get people to go to Atlantic City. So let's look at some of the films that were set, not just in Atlantic City, but up and down the Jersey Shore. Okay. In 1929, a film came out called The Cohens and the Kellys in Atlantic City. And this was part of a series. There were 6 or 7 of these films, and it was about these two families, the Cohens, a Jewish family, and the Kellys, an Irish family. And they would go off on all these different adventures. They went to Africa in one of the films. They went to Scotland. They went to Hollywood. And at some point they got in trouble. That was the last film they did in 1932. This was part silent and part, somebody has a question already? I'm sorry.
Irv, I have to tell you, my father was a busboy in the hotel where the cast of this movie were staying when they filmed the movie. It was the highlight of his life. He met movies. He was maybe 15, 16 years old and was a busboy. And they stayed in a kosher hotel and he was a busboy there. He always, all his life, he talked about this movie.
That's fascinating.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Oh, sure. Maybe we'll talk about it later on. Thanks for telling me that. So yeah, so the Cohens and the Kellys in Atlantic City. It was a pretty popular movie. It says starring George Sidney. George Sidney went on to become a pretty popular director in Hollywood. He started out as an actor. And in the Cohens and the Kellys of Atlantic City, it was a family, and they each had kids, and the kids actually get together, which neither family liked the fact that the boy from one side got together with the girl from the other side. As you see here, this is, the father not looking very happy here. And it was put out by Universal. Carl Laemmle was the guy that owned Universal. And the premise of the movie was that the two kids who have a romance, who get together, there's a beauty pageant, and they design a bathing suit. And the bathing suits are actually pretty risque for their time. And they enter it into this contest, and there's a beauty pageant in it. And that's what, yes.
The movie was a sequel to one called Abe's Irish Rose. Abe was the Jewish fella, and Rose was the Irish girl he married. So these were sequels.
Okay.
I just remember.
There was a whole series of them that came after that. So this is, I think this is the first, no, this is the third or fourth one. So, okay. So these are some examples of the posters. And also, later on in 1935, there was a film, by the way, it's very hard to find a copy of that. I was looking for a clip and I couldn't find it. I wanted to show it to you, but there was this movie called Convention Girl. And again, set in Atlantic City and actually filmed in Atlantic City. And it was about a woman who is questionable scruples, who gets involved with all sorts of guys coming to a convention, but she finds the true love and she settles down. Here's the beginning of it. Rose Hobart, somebody who probably is pretty much forgotten these days, but it did feature somebody you should all recognize, and that is this guy named Shemp Howard, one of the Three Stooges, Moe and Curly's brother. And at the time, Shemp was known as the ugliest guy in show business. So he didn't have a problem being called that because he got good parts playing an ugly guy. He has a minor role in the film. Yeah. So after that came this film, Atlantic City, with Constance Moore, and this is 1944. So obviously we're into the talkie era. And it was a musical Constance Moore was a musical star, and it was not really shot in Atlantic City, although it was set in Atlantic City. It's an interesting film. I don't know if you could see that, but Jerry Colonna was in it. If you remember him with the wild mustache, did a lot of TV stuff. And it also featured some live jazz with Louis Armstrong and Dorothy Dandridge in it. And you can actually see not very good clips on YouTube of them performing from the film. And yeah, here's one of the shots from the film. I couldn't get any of Louis or Dorothy there, but as you see, it's a beach motif. Some of it was shot here, some of it was shot in the studio. And there's some other jazz performers in there as well, and some vaudeville acts. This film came out set in Atlantic City called Three Little Girls in Blue. It was a 20th Century Fox musical, and you can see it was a pretty big cast, a lot of famous names in there. June Haver, George Montgomery, Vivian Blaine, Celeste Holm, Vera Ellen, Frank Lattimore. And it was in Technicolor, which meant that they put some money behind it at the time. And it's all about a few sisters that come from Red Bank, New Jersey, and they go to Atlantic City to have some fun. And there's some mix-ups in it, and they get involved with some guys. But it actually had some very interesting music that became famous. One of the songs in it was You Make Me Feel So Young, which is pretty much a standard. And also, this is where the song On the Boardwalk in Atlantic City comes from. It was written for this movie. The person that wrote this, the music was by a guy named Joseph Miro, and the lyrics were by Mac Gordon. Mac Gordon became a very popular lyricist. He wrote the lyrics, and he also wrote the song At Last, Chattanooga Choo Choo, I Could Begin to Tell You, I've Got a Girl in Kalamazoo, The More I See You, which was popularized again in the 1960s. I remember that when I was a kid growing up. And one of my favorites, Looky, 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 Here Comes Cookie. I'm sure that's all on your hit parade. But it was set in Atlantic City. There were some pickup shots there. Most of it was done in the studio out in California. And it was known for the music and the musical numbers. And some of them are actually quite elaborate. We're going to go ahead a couple decades. And we're going to come to a movie called The Burglar. The Burglar was shot. It was financed by a guy in Philadelphia named Louis Kellman. And it was a film noir written by a Philadelphia writer named David Goodis, who wrote several pulp novels, I guess you would call them, crime noirs. And it featured Jane Mansfield in one of her first films. Jane Mansfield was from Bryn Mawr, PA, and Dan Duryea and Martha Vickers. And it's all about the heist of sort of this fake, what would you call her? Fortune teller. These diamonds they steal from her. And Jane Mansfield plays the young woman who helps this group of thieves take these diamonds. And the police get involved and some crooked cops get involved. Here's a picture of the book. Goodis was from Philadelphia, born in the Logan section, lived there off and on throughout his life. It was actually later remade as a film called The Burglars. That was a European film with Diane Cannon in it and all these European stars. And in The Burglar, it was all shot in the area. There's Jane. She's very young there, of course. This generation knows her as Mariska Hargitay's mother, I guess, more than knowing who Jane Mansfield is. And there's Dan Duryea in The Burglar. This is the credit sequence, which is shot in the Narberth Theater, which is still there and operating. There you see Dan in front of the art museum. It was shot all over the area. You see Manayunk in the film. You see Bryn Mawr. You see Bala Cynwyd. You see lots of shots of Center City. But in The Burglar, there's a chase down one of the pikes. I'm not sure if it's the Black Horse or White Horse Pike, and they end up on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. And I think they filmed this and people didn't know they were filming a movie because you could tell the crowd really has no clue what's going on. And there's Jane and Dan Duryea. And the cops are after them, and they end up going into the fun house. They actually go into a haunted house there, and they run into Steel Pier in the film. So there's lots of shots of Atlantic City in the movie. And there's Jane talking on the phone at the boardwalk. There's also scenes that were shot in Brigantine. That's where the crooks hang out. And there is a scene where they're watching the famous diving horse. And you think these days the cruelty involved in that, but it was a fixture, the shore, for decades. It goes back, I think, to the 20s. There you can actually see the diving horse. They shot it during one of the shows where they do the diving horse jumping off the high board there and into a pool of water. Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie came out after two of his biggest hits, Psycho and The Birds, and it was not a hit. It got very mixed reception, mixed reviews. And in Marnie, Sean Connery plays this man from a wealthy family. He's very rich. And Tippi Hedren plays a woman that he hires to work for his company. And she happens to be a kleptomaniac, but she has other issues as well. And it's a very disturbing psychological film. He tries some unusual things in it, like different tints for different scenes. And it was not well received. Although in recent years, say the last 10, people have taken another look at it. And they say, you know, there's something here, it's worth checking out. Might not be one of his best films, but it's one of his more complex films. It's a psychological thriller. And there is a sequence in the film that was shot at the Atlantic City racetrack, which is now gone for several years. And Marnie goes there with the Connery character, and they sort of, go to watch the races. And most of it, there are pickup scenes that were shot at the Atlantic City racetrack, but most of the sequences with them in it were shot on a soundstage, and they just put the backgrounds in with matte shots, which is very common in Hitchcock films. And here you can see a matte shot. They're at the race course in the background, and they're nowhere near the course or the track. They're in a studio somewhere, but in the background they have something very common in Hitchcock film, having that background, the matte shot in that. And here's another shot of them at the racetrack. He's looking at the racing form there. This is a fairly obscure film that was filmed in Wildwood and the Villas. It's a film from 1971 called Going Home. That's with Robert Mitchum. He plays a guy with a very dark background. He was accused of killing his wife. He got out of prison. His son is estranged from him, and his son's played by Jan Michael Vincent, who was just becoming a pretty big star at the time. He comes back after several years, and he tries to make amends with his father, and they have a very uncomfortable relationship in the movie. Brenda Vaccaro is also in it. She plays Robert Mitchum's girlfriend in the movie. And here's a scene with Jan Michael Vincent, and they're bowling, and the whole film was shot in the Wildwood area and in the villas there. I have friends that were obviously older than me that actually went down there to see them shoot some of this stuff. And they all sort of have a similar story. They visited Mitchum. They had pretty free access because, between shooting or maybe had a day off, they scheduled them and they went into his trailer. And, Robert liked to drink, and they said he was soaking up some of the vodka there, and he told great stories. So they remember fondly spending time with him, and he loved telling stories and hanging out with just sort of common folk. And at least two of my friends that are older told me about going down there and seeing them shoot some of this and hanging out with Mitchum. And part of the film takes place in a trailer park, which is, you see here in the background, which is where Mitchum lives in the film, and that's Jan Michael Vincent there. Okay, in the early 70s, Hollywood was changing, and there was a company that managed to produce a lot of films geared to younger audiences. And they were the ones involved in producing Easy Rider, Five Easy Pieces, and The Last Picture Show. And one of their lesser films, I won't say a lesser film, but least successful films, was this movie called King of Marvin Gardens, directed by Bob Rafelson. The film starred Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern, and Ellen Burstyn. The beginning starts in Philadelphia. It was all shot on location. And then Nicholson plays a radio disc jockey whose brother, played by Bruce Dern, calls him. He's in Atlantic City, and he's about to make a real estate deal. And the brother, Dern, is very flaky, and Nicholson doesn't want to know if he wants to get involved with him. Nicholson was originally offered the part of the flaky brother. You know, he's usually bigger than life Jack, even then, beginning of his career after Easy Rider, but he wanted to take the quieter part and show he could do something different. So he plays the quiet disc jockey guy, and he goes to Atlantic City to see what his brother's up to with this business deal. There's a lot of great shots of Atlantic City. It takes place during the colder months, so it's very desolate, and you could pretty much feel the ocean breezes coming up on you. And here's a shot of Nicholson and Dern, where Dern on the left, Nicholson on the right, walking by Irene's, which I certainly remember as a kid going to Atlantic City, place that pretty much had everything in there: beach supplies and toys and gimmicks and clothing and sunglasses. And there were several of them on the boardwalk. And here they're walking down the boardwalk. And here they are in front of one of the Sky Tower, which was on Central Pier. It was something similar to the Needle in Seattle, where it would take you all the way up to the top, and you could see this panoramic view of Atlantic City and beyond. It was a really neat thing to go on. And it went way, way up there. That's long gone as well. And here's Ellen Burstyn, who comes in by train, and they greet her with a marching band is there to greet her, and she gets involved with them. And here's a scene. Well, here's a landscape shot of the great old hotels in Atlantic City. The Traymore, I know, was one of them. Haddon Hall is there. I remember these when I was a kid, and there's a lot of scenes where this is the background. You see the city. If you can get a hold of this film, I really recommend it. It's not a happy film, but it's really worth seeing just for the shots of Atlantic City. And it's actually a very good film, seeing these two actors when they're pretty young, and Burstyn as well. This is one of her first films, I believe. And there's a scene in the movie where they go and eat lobster at Captain Starnes, if you remember Captain Starnes, down by the inlet. And here you see Dern on the left, Burstyn in the middle, and Nicholson on the right. And there's the sign for Captain Starnes. They had boating, it's where the boat stocked, and also they had a big restaurant in there, and also an outdoor kind of diner place where, you know, you can get oysters or clams, and a market as well. In the 80s, a film came out called Tattoo, which was very, very controversial. And again, Bruce Dern goes back to the shore in the film. It was shot all around Atlantic City, Margate, Ventnor, and it starred Bruce Dern, and he plays a guy who is a tattoo artist, and he becomes obsessed with a woman that he wants to put this tattoo on her, and she's played by Maud Adams in the film. When the film came out, it didn't make much of a impact, and over the years, it hasn't really been available to watch. And recently, just over the last year and a half, it was supposed to come out on video, but they canceled it. And I think the reason they canceled it is because some of the subjects that it touches on, this idea of obsession And it's definitely politically incorrect by today's standards, but it really wasn't promoted well, or maybe they were afraid if they did promote it, it would cause an uproar or furor when it was released. So it never really got the release, kind of under the radar, and still remains that way. Very, very hard to see this film, but it did make good use of Atlantic City in parts that you didn't see, the residential areas of Margate and Ventnor, and some stuff on the boardwalk. I'm sure most of you, if you have not seen this film, you've heard of it. Overseas, it was called Atlantic City, USA. Here it was just called Atlantic City. Probably the last great lead performance by Burt Lancaster, and also with a very young Susan Sarandon. This is a foreign poster of it. The film was actually done with French money, and Paramount picked it up. And surprise, surprise, it was nominated for several Academy Awards. The movie stars Burt Lancaster, and he plays an older gentleman who was involved. He was a small-time crook, younger, involved with the rackets and some questionable activities. And he gets interested in Susan Sarandon, who is a young woman who's working at a clam bar. And she has a brother who's involved in drug dealing, and Lancaster gets kind of sucked in, or not sucked in, but he wants to do something involving this drug deal for like one last score. And at the same time, he becomes attracted to her. The movie was directed by Louis Malle, the great French director who was married to Candice Bergen at one time. And it really caught on with the critics and with audiences. People really loved this film. It had a certain nostalgic feel to it, and it really hit a chord. And here's a scene on the board with Burt Lancaster. Again, the movie was shot in the area. There's also a scene shot in Philadelphia in Independence Square, and that is Sarandon's brother in the film. He gets involved in the drug dealing with Lancaster. And here's another scene at the casino there. It is resorts. There's scenes of demolition of buildings in the beginning of the film, where the old hotels are going down, and it's the very, very early days of the casinos. So resorts was pretty much the only one open at the time. Now, if you remember, when resorts opened, you had to wear a sport jacket to get in. And if you didn't have one, you could rent it at the door. That's what I remember. It was a very strict dress code at the time. That really has changed if you're ever in a casino in Atlantic City. This is a film that not that many people know. It's called Touched. And the movie was from 1982, and it starred Robert Hayes, who was the lead in Airplane. Besides the Airplane movies, his career, it's sort of, he hasn't really been in the news a lot, or has had a lot of popular movies, but he has continued to work in other TV and other things. And Touch was filmed in the Wildwood area, and he plays a man that comes out of a sanitarian, and he wants to start his life over again, and he gets involved. This is his family here. He goes back to his family, and this is shot in Wildwood. A lot of stuff at the Wildwood Boardwalk, and Ned Beatty plays his father in the film. And he gets involved with this younger woman named played by the actress Kathleen Beller. It's a kind of a low-key drama. It reminds me a lot of David and Lisa, which is a movie that coincidentally shot in the Philadelphia area. These two people that have emotional issues, have this romantic relationship in it. And the whole thing was shot in the Wildwood area. Something a little lighter, movie called Wise Guys, Danny DeVito and Joe Piscopo. In Wise Guys, it was directed by Brian De Palma, best known for directing thrillers. This was a little lighter for him. And in the film, they play these two gangsters that they kind of mess everything up, and the mob's not happy with what they're doing, so they give them each an assignment to kill each other. One doesn't know the other one's trying to kill them, and you know, funny things occur, and things go haywire as they try to kill each other, and they don't realize it for a long time. The movie was shot again at resorts, and in and around Ventnor, where some of the hoods live in the movie. And here's a scene here on the boardwalk with Danny and Joe Piscopo. De Palma will come back and shoot another movie in the area, and we'll talk about that soon. But De Palma's was raised in Philadelphia. His father was a surgeon, so he knew the area pretty well. This film was a surprise hit called Eddie and the Cruisers, and it starred Michael Paré, who was a pretty big star at the time. You don't see him much around anymore. And Eddie and the Cruisers, Eddie is a rock and roll artist who goes missing in a mysterious car accident, and he has this record that hasn't been released, and it's supposedly his masterpiece. A lot of the music was very similar sounding to Bruce Springsteen. It was done by a group called John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, and they were a Jersey bar band. So there's a lot of shots that were set, a lot of scenes set in Jersey bars, including, here's a shot of Eddie and the Cruisers, from Eddie and the Cruisers. That is Eddie, Michael Paré, with a very young Tom Berenger, who plays this reporter that's trying to find what happened to Eddie in the film. And there is the boardwalk, and that is Ocean City, I believe. And here's a shot. A lot of the scenes were shot at Tony Mart's at Summers Point, which is a very popular club in its time. It's right where the circle is, sort of going into Ocean City there. There was a sequel called Eddie Lives, and that did not do very well, and most of that was shot in Montreal. And I had to interview Michael Paré for the book that I did on Philadelphia films, and he had some great stories about making the movie. The whole cast and crew were put up at the Rickshaw Inn on Route 38, which was near the Latin Casino, which was across from the Garden State Racetrack. That's where they were, and they would commute by bus or take them by bus every day down the shore to shoot this stuff. And they shot also in Mount Holly and Haverford College. And he said, if you watch the movie, you will see him and the female lead in the movie is played by Ellen Barkin, very young Ellen Barkin, when she was just starting out. He says, if you watch the movie closely, you'll see me and Ellen Barkin itching, scratching our head a lot. And he said, that's because there was lice at the Rickshaw Inn. I thought that was disturbing and funny at the same time. But he remembered that years later, that's what was going on when they were making the movie. And there's Tony Mart's there. Remember that? I think it was also a liquor store and a club where they had bands play. A film called The Lemon Sisters, Diane Keaton, Carol Kane, and Catherine Grody, Elliot Gould, Aidan Quinn, and Ruben Blades. And it's about three friends who have a singing group, and they play lounges in Atlantic City. There was a lot of stuff shot indoors at the various casino lounges. Here they are in costume, the three performers, and they do songs from 60s girls groups in it, like the Chiffons and the Supremes. And it was shot in the old Atlantis Hotel. If you remember that, I think that was the Playboy Casino originally, Bally's Park Place, and the Claridge. So they used several casinos for that. Here's the other De Palma movie. It's a movie called Snake Eyes. And Snake Eyes features Nicolas Cage in another one of his wild performances, not subtle at all. And he plays a cop, and there's a big boxing match in Atlantic City. And his old friend is head of the security detail at this boxing match, His old friend is played by Gary Sinise, that you remember from Forrest Gump. And during this boxing match, there's an assassination, and there's all these different elements, and he sort of has to figure out who was involved in the assassination. There's a mysterious onlooker, a woman wearing a blonde wig. There's other characters. He has to look at the surveillance cameras and figure out who was involved in this, and it becomes this big conspiracy. The movie, and here's a scene of him and Gary Sinise as you see Nick in one of his manic modes, which is often, and this was shot at Trump Taj Mahal. The scenes that were shot in the casino, and you could see here Sinise, and that's how the hallways were there, sort of with that grand look of the Taj Mahal. The movie, there's John Hurd. John Hurd, a great character actor, no longer with us. He plays a character based on Donald Trump in the movie. He's the guy that runs the casino in the film. Actually, you kind of made him up to look like him with the hair back there. At the end of the movie, there's this huge storm that takes place in this storm, and there's a lot of sequences on the boardwalk. This is all miniatures that was done. There was no CGI then. So there's this incredible storm, these huge waves, and they actually shot it where there was a typhoon or a tsunami that envelops the entire casino and the boardwalk, but they actually cut that out. So it is a very intense storm, but not as bad where the tsunami destroys Atlantic City. So that's Snake Eyes. It's an interesting film. It's very complicated, and with Nicolas Cage in the middle, of course, it goes off the rails a couple times. This is a movie called Blades, and a friend of mine actually produced this and wrote it. He didn't direct it, and it was picked up by Troma, which is a low-budget company known for their bad, bad good movies or good bad movies like The Toxic Avenger. And the movie is sort of my friend John Finnegan's tribute to Jaws, but instead of a killer shark, it's a killer lawnmower, if you can imagine that. And the idea is that there's a lawnmower. It's set almost entirely in a golf club, which was the Villas. There was a golf club there where they shot it. And I'm wondering if that's how John got the investors saying, to the members, I'm going to make this movie, give me some money, and we'll put the golf club in it. Maybe I'll give you a cameo. That wouldn't surprise me knowing John. But it actually was a movie that came out in the theaters, and it's a lot of fun. It's stupid fun. I don't think he would mind me saying that. It's very much like Jaws, except it is a killer lawnmower rather than a shark that runs over people and chews them up and stuff like that. The place, the golf club, was owned by this guy named Billy Flaumer. Billy Flaumer was the man that owned Schmidt's Beer in Philadelphia. It's quite a character from what I read. It was called something else, and then he nicknamed this Beer World. That's what he named the golf club when he took it over. Coincidentally, he hated beer, the guy, but he owned the beer company. And he got into some tax trouble, and I think he lost it. And now they took the club down probably about 10 years ago. I mean, it was idle for a long time, and they made it a natural reserve, like a nature place. And there was the pool at the golf club called Schmidt's. You can see he has the logo there. So much for the movie Blades. I'm glad John got his movie made. I went to the premiere, and it was interesting to see these people there and meet some of them. And I think they expected maybe 1/100th of what Jaws made, but I don't think it even got there. They would have been very happy with 1/100th. And like I said, this place was in the Villas near Wildwood. Beaches, who I'm sure some of you remember, directed by Gary Marshall, sentimental film with Bette Midler and Barbara Hershey as old friends set in and around Atlantic City. Some of it shot there. Here's a scene of them on the beach. Barbara Hershey on the left, Bette Midler on the right, Divine Miss M. And there's flashbacks of when they're kids, and I didn't realize this until recently, but there they are as kids, the Bette youngster on the right, and the Barbara Hershey, the dark hair on the left, and that is on the Atlantic City Boardwalk. And the actress that played Bette Midler when she was young in the film was Maya Bialik, who went on to, being a star in her own right on TV, and she's producing now. And I didn't realize that till recently, that she was a kid actress and she played that part. Okay, Rounders. Rounders is considered one of the great poker films or gambling films. It's shot in several places, but there is sequences that are shot in Atlantic City, also at Trump Taj Mahal, and it stars Matt Damon and Edward Norton and John Malkovich, and they're high stakes poker players in it. And there is a sequence and that's shot at Taj Mahal. There it is. And there's a sequence in it that is where Damon's playing cards in the poker room there at the Taj Mahal. Most of the film was shot in New York, in the area there, but there is a couple scenes, in particular this high tension poker game in the film shot at Trump Taj Mahal. Let's go up north a little bit. And this is a film called City by the Sea with Robert De Niro and Frances McDormand, who certainly was in the news this week, winning another Oscar for herself. And the film was actually not set in Asbury Park, although it was filmed almost entirely in Asbury Park. City by the Sea is actually supposed to be set in Long Beach, New York, but they shot in Asbury Park, and it really captures Asbury Park. I think it's had somewhat of a renaissance lately, from what I understand. I haven't been there in a long time, but it was really in bad shape, which makes a very seedy background to this story. In the film, De Niro is a cop, and Franco is a son. It's another estranged son story where the son comes back, and Frances McDormand plays De Niro's current girlfriend in the film. Franco is very young in this movie. He was just starting out acting in it. And here's a shot of the Asbury Park Boardwalk. And there's a very young James Franco and De Niro in the movie. It's a good drama. It's a family drama, and it's worth checking out if you could find it. And here's De Niro with Frances McDormand in the film. So there's her from the back. The next film really went under the radar, and I really like this movie. It's called Dwayne Hopwood, shot mostly in the Atlantic City area, especially in Margate. I believe he lives in Ventnor in the movie. And David Schwimmer from Friends tries something more serious, and he actually does a good job with this film, even though it was made in the 90s. I'm sorry, it's made in 2005. Really feels like a movie from the 70s, which is a good thing. It takes chances. It's an independent film. He really went kind of lo-fi on this, which I like. And in the film, he's married to Janine Garofalo, and they have a really ugly divorce. And he's about to lose joint custody of his two daughters in it. And he's got a serious alcohol problem in the movie. And it's sort of about him trying to build his life back up and come to terms with his alcoholism. So it's not a real light, funny movie, but he plays a pit boss at Caesars in the film. And there is Caesars. And it's a good film to find. There's some great supporting bits in it, including one from Dick Cavett, of all people. He has a really strong supporting role. I never knew he could act, but he does an excellent job. And here's a scene on the abandoned Atlantic City Boardwalk in the morning with Schwimmer and his daughter in the film, riding bikes, of course. And here's another scene on the Atlantic City Boardwalk. It was all shot there. And the director was an actor named Matt Mullen, who knows the area pretty well. This movie got a lot of press when it came out. A lot of people thought Mickey Rourke was going to win Best Actor, resurrect his career. Didn't quite happen that way, although I think he won the Golden Globe. And it's a terrific movie. It's with Marissa Tomei, who was nominated as well. And he plays this burned out has-been wrestler who was pretty much working at a cutting cold cuts at a supermarket and going to shows where he's signing autographs, and he wants to make a comeback in the ring. And a lot of it was shot in North Jersey, but there are sequences that were shot at the Asbury Park Convention Center in the film. One of the big matches in the film, I think it's the last match actually, which ends the film, kind of leaves you hanging at the end of the movie, and the match where Rourke battles somebody else is there, and there's a scene where they're strolling up the Asbury Park Boardwalk. And speaking of fighting, a movie called Warrior with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton. It actually got a pretty strong following. It's about mixed martial arts fighters. And although a lot of it's set in Pittsburgh and a lot was shot in Pittsburgh, there is a big fight sequence that uses, and here's a shot of it here, two brothers going against each other, that was shot at Convention Hall, or Boardwalk Hall, as it's now called, in Atlantic City. And that was where I remember every year the Ice Capades would be there. I remember my grandfather taking me to see wrestling and roller derby there, and where Miss America took place every year. So they did use that facility. What a great old facility it is. I have loving memories of that place. Boardwalk Empire was based on a book called Boardwalk Empire, and it's all about Atlantic City in the 20s and the 30s during Prohibition. The film stars character actor Steve Buscemi as Nookie Johnson. And did you have to, Lillian, did you want to say something?
Yeah, this whole thing has touched my life. I had an uncle, Max, who was a bootlegger for Nucky Johnson. And after Prohibition, Nucky sent him up in a bar in Atlantic City, and then he had a luncheonette on the boardwalk. But Nucky was associated with Al Capone. And my uncle always bragged he had been a bootlegger for Nucky Johnson.
Oh, well.
They did the liquor in the pine barrens, so the revenues couldn't find them.
Wow, interesting. Thank you. Yeah, Nookie Johnson was the unofficial mayor of Atlantic City and involved in all sorts of graft and, very powerful. And as I said, he was played by Steve Buscemi, very familiar character actor, who really looked nothing like the real Nucky. There he is there, not much of a resemblance at all. The show, which lasted 5 years, really had a following. It was produced by Martin Scorsese and Terrence Winter, who did The Sopranos, and also Mark Wahlberg. So you have some really big names involved. And there's great sequences set in Atlantic City. However, none of it was shot in Atlantic City. I don't even think there were pickup shots done there, but they did an incredible job of resurrecting, showing Atlantic City. They built the boardwalk in Brooklyn, and you could see the incredible detail that they used in the film. They had really the top-notch designers, people doing production, clothing, and Scorsese shot the first pilot episode for $18 million, which is amazing that HBO would spend that much on a one-shot pilot. But they wanted something really high class and that looked like a movie, and it did. And it talks all about especially a lot about bootlegging, as Lillian mentioned, but also there's famous gangsters in the film, real gangsters like Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, you know, several of them that Nookie came into contact with. The book's terrific, by the way. They took a lot of liberties when they did the show, but they had to expand it and get 5 years out of it. So here are some shots of some of the incredible production that they did. You'll see that the boardwalk is a lot smaller than it is in real life. You know, and the rolling cars are there. They really get it right. And here it is in Brooklyn. The people in Brooklyn were not happy about this at all. From what I read, they were not thrilled that this was going on there, and they disrupted their neighborhood for 5 years. I know some people that are actors that had kind of extra parts in it, and they said it was a great experience. It was wonderful. They had a lot of fun doing it. It was really neat. Scorsese would pop in every once in a while and kind of oversee things. But you could see the boardwalk is a lot, not as wide as the real boardwalk is. And there's another shot, and you can see the boardwalk, how small it is there. And like I said, none of this was in Atlantic City. And there's another shot there as well. We come towards the end of the program, and The Godfather Part 3 had a sequence shot in Atlantic City. And they actually just retitled this. It is now called The Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone. Francis Coppola made some changes in the film, and they reissued it. Unfortunately, it was during COVID. It did play in the theaters. I don't think many people went to see it, but you could see it now on demand or on DVD. And the sequence that was shot here is a meeting that they have at the Palazzo Azzurro, which is actually Trump Castle, that they, they renamed it for the film. And in the scene, Michael Corleone and the Andy Garcia character are in it. And there's the Trump Castle. That was the Trump resort that was near the marina there, near Harrah's. This is the sequence where there's a big meeting of the families, and somebody hears these helicopters hovering nearby. And sure enough, there's lots of shooting that happen, and Michael and Andy Garcia have to get out of there. Some of this stuff was, a lot was shot in Atlantic City, but some of it actually was shot in Italy, famous studio there, where a lot of movies by Fellini and other famous directors were shot. But there is scenes from Atlantic City in the movie of The Godfather 3. And that ends our program. So I hope you liked it. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to take some.
I have a question.
Mr. Peanut says, I hope you liked it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who are you? You're talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, I sound like a movie. Okay. The movie that David Schwimmer was in,
Yes.
some man's name. Okay. He was on Friends, right?
Yes.
And there was another, I don't know, I just am blanking on her name, the one that was married to Brad Pitt, the really pretty blonde.
Jennifer Aniston.
That's it. I knew it was Jennifer. Okay. So when Jennifer Aniston was making movies, they were promoted because of the popularity of the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
The movie that you mentioned with David Schwimmer, I mean, I have never even heard of it. And I went to a lot of movies. I would go, a whole lot of movies those years in the beginning of the 2000s. I have never even heard of it. Was it promoted? Because I don't think it was around here, but I probably would have gone even though I didn't watch Friends. I never heard of that. I mean, boom.
It probably played at the Ritz for a week or two.
Oh, it was art house. Was that considered art house?
Yeah, it was more of an art house, low key. Not Jennifer Aniston made a lot of Hollywood movies, and this was Schwimmer's way of doing, something low key and independent. So yeah, it probably didn't play long, but it did probably at the Ritz, one of the Ritzes.
Okay, and the other quick question: Boardwalk Empire was just on TV, right? They never made a movie out of that, did they?
Yeah,
okay.
That was just a series on HBO. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, hey, Irv, I've got a question for you again about Boardwalk Empire. And so I thought I read somewhere when the show was on HBO that the building that Nucky Johnson lived in the show, it was frequently shown from outside. And I recognized one of the aspects of it in the still you showed of the movie that had Bruce Dern and Jack Nicholson. What I read, what I believe I read, and I just wanted to find out if it's true, and then if it's true, why. What I believe I read was that the exterior shots of the building that Nucky lived in was an amalgam of famous hotels from Atlantic City, but it wasn't faithfully recreated. And if that's the case, my question about that is why? I mean, they've got the historical figures in there and they're celebrating something and the heyday, the golden era of Atlantic City. Why would they do an amalgam, in your opinion, rather than faithfully recreate exteriors?
I don't know. I'm not sure of that answer.
Okay.
Other than the architecture of those buildings, each one, even though they look like they mesh perfectly. If you look at the landscape, each one had a different kind of architecture. This one, I don't know much about that, but each one had a very distinctive look. So maybe they just wanted it to blend in. That's possible, but I really don't know why they didn't do that. It was probably the Traymore was probably the one that he lived in, I would think, because that was one of the big ones in the middle, and it had stores on the bottom, I believe. But there were a bunch of them there. So I don't know the answer, other than that's a guess that I have.
Okay.
So,
of course, anybody else want to take themselves off mute and ask a question, please do feel free.
yeah, I didn't include every film, especially Atlantic City. There's a lot of scenes where there's a lot of movies where there's one scene in the film. And also Asbury Park area as well. So there's movies that have like one sequence in it. Dwayne Hopwood, by the way, was done really cheaply. It was shot in 20 days, which is very fast, even for a low budget film. And I think Schwimmer just wanted to, show that he had the acting chops without doing a light comedy.
Got a question being typed in here. This is from Marge. Other than Atlantic City, were there other movies set in Jersey? Anyone that you would want to highlight?
Well, I mentioned some set in Asbury Park, and Wildwood, and there's a lot of movies shot in North Jersey, certainly. Patterson, Newark, etc. I would say a good one is Copland, which is North Jersey. Sylvester Stallone, Robert De Niro. That really gets that North Jersey kind of grimy feel to it. I'm surprised that Cape May hasn't really been used, because that's a really picturesque little town, and I'm surprised that I can't recall anything. I was looking for something shot there and I couldn't find anything shot there.
Well, my family and I spend a lot of time in Cape May, and just want to say that mentioning that there's anything set in the villas, really I found fascinating. I know it was Blades, but as we're spending this summer down there and passing through the villas, as we often do, we might be on the lookout on our bikes for wherever that golf club was.
I can give you the address if you want it. I can email
email that to me. That would be hilarious.
Yeah, but it was a pretty big place, and I forgot the name of what it was before. It was Beer World or whatever he called it, but he had a pretty interesting history. This guy seemed like quite a character that owned Schmitz, at least for several years. I don't know how he got it, but I think he tried to take over another big beer company, and they sort of looked at his background. They didn't, a little shaky. So I don't know what happened there.
Irv, can I ask about one movie, Irv?
Sure.
There's one that I have a very fond memory of, and I think it's by a very Jersey kind of filmmaker as well, that has a Jersey Shore scene. And I think it was mostly shot in Trenton, from the 80s, Baby It's You.
Yeah.
By John Sayles. And I believe the whole thing is shot in Trenton, but then, it's about high school students in the 60s, the nice Jewish girl and an other side of the tracks girl. And no, nice Jewish girl, other side of the tracks guy, and they cut school and go to Asbury Park. And I know that the whole movie's got a lot of Springsteen music in it, which is as Jersey Shore-ish as it gets.
Right.
And I remember that one, a very sweet little movie.
Yeah, I remember that. It's Roseanne Arquette,
Yes.
Vincent Spano, and his nickname was the Sheik for reasons I won't get into. But yeah. Yeah, they shot a couple days there, and I think there's a quick scene there. You'll see that, like I said, in movies where they only have like a quick fleeting beach scene in it. There's another movie called Stealing Home with Jodie Foster and Mark Harmon, and she dies at the beginning of the film, and they go to spread her ashes. And I think they go to Ocean City for that. So it has one quick scene, but that is a very Jersey movie because Trenton is the background of the movie. And you even see the bridge, I think.
Yes.
Bridge. Yeah.
And a lot of Springsteen. I remember.
I think it's the first film where he allowed his music to be allowed it to be used in a film. Somebody just had a question about Jersey Shore, whether that hurt the reputation of Jersey. It couldn't have helped. So I don't know. I mean, then you have the Real Housewives of Jersey, but I guess that's North Jersey. Jersey Shore couldn't have helped. But yeah. Most of the films I noticed about New Jersey are not the lightest of comedy.
So it does look like, Irv, are you still there? You've frozen. There is a storm passing through the area, so you got to allow for that to play some havoc with telecom.